Hi, fam, and welcome to the Truth House with Tony Quinn, where we talk addiction, recovery, and everything in between. So, I put it out there to my Instagram homies and I asked you guys what kind of topic you would like me to discuss. And an overwhelming amount of people said, how do I help someone who is struggling with addiction? Be it a family member, a sibling, a loved one, a partner, a friend, anyone. And this is a really deep issue. And this is something that requires a lot of nuance in the way I approach answering this question. I can easily sit here and tell you my experience with that, how different people in my life reacted in different ways and what they did to cope, how it made me feel, all of that. But at the end of the day, we're all individuals. We're all different people. I've experienced everything from tough love, a word I find problematic, to the concept of enabling, another word I find problematic, but we'll dive into that later as well. I've experienced just about everything loved ones can do to try and help me as an addict seek help. But it's important to understand we are all individuals and we will all react to things differently. What's most important is that this video offers a holistic overview and unpacks all the different possibilities that come with different kinds of reactions. What we need to look at is, what is addiction? What is addiction? In order to help someone with addiction, I think we need to have a view of what addiction actually is without prejudice, stigma, or bias. Secondly, we need to see how you, someone who has a loved one who's struggling with addiction, is able to set boundaries and prioritize your well-being in order to help. And then we need to really take a look at how to offer meaningful support through this. And sometimes that may look like taking a step back. And we will unpack all of that in this video. And what I think I need to start with is giving you a brief overview of what addiction is, at least to help educate on the way addiction is perceived and how it is identified and how it is understood medically and psychologically. So again, I am by no means a doctor. I am coming to you as a recovering addict who has also helped other addicts and is a peer support counselor that doesn't even practice. And I'm giving you my perspective on this that comes with a lot of research. There will be links and resources in the description of this video, so you can do further research, because that's the point, that we keep learning and we keep educating and we have support systems to help us. Okay, let's dive right in. Let's unpack what addiction is. Okay, so in order to truly help someone who's struggling with addiction, it's important we try understand what addiction actually is. And it's also important to note that many experts will argue on the classification of addiction. Many people believe it to be a chronic disease, a brain disorder, or something that is built from trauma. So we're going to take a look at the historic identification of addiction, which is the disease of addiction. So addiction historically has been known as a chronic disease. That's because it is similar to diabetes and heart disease in the fact that it has identifiable risk factors. These risk factors, when it comes to addiction, are genetic, trauma, and environmental. So we put all of that together and we get the disease of addiction. It is also progressive, like many chronic illnesses, and it requires consistent treatment and management like other chronic illnesses. So that is one way people have historically viewed and identified and classified addiction. It is also important to note that the disease model of addiction is helpful in reducing the stigma around addiction. It has taken it from being a moral failing. So many people view addiction as a moral failing without looking at the bigger picture around and the nuance around addiction and what drove a person to try drugs or substances in the first place. So it reduces that stigma, and in that way it has been incredibly helpful. However, in recent years, many people have argued that addiction is a brain disorder. So how do we move from the classification of the disease of addiction, the chronic disease of addiction, to a brain disorder that still many specialists will argue against and prefer a different kind of term? So a brain disorder, let's dive into that. So this shift in classification is based on how addiction fundamentally shifts brain function and how it impacts areas of reward, impulse control, and emotional regulation. For example, when someone uses drugs or alcohol repeatedly, their brain becomes wired to prioritize substance over everything else. And the term brain disorder, much like chronic disease, highlights how these changes are not simply a choice. However, this doesn't mean that recovery isn't possible either. It means the brain can heal with the right treatment and the right support. And then there is another way to look at addiction where many people view it as a result of trauma and pain. This view focuses on systemic issues, trauma, societal pressures, lack of support. And from this perspective, addiction isn't just based on personal factors. It's based on larger societal issues. Ultimately, addiction can be viewed holistically, taking all three of these perspectives into account. And in my opinion, it can't be explained neatly in one model. I believe it to be biological, psychological, trauma-based, and have elements of disease and genetics all interweaved into it. In my opinion, addiction is all three of these things and more. At the end of the day, what's important to acknowledge is addiction isn't a moral failure, and it doesn't come down to lack of love or will. It's a difficult condition that requires both medical and emotional healing and compassion in order to find some sort of recovery. Okay, now that we've taken a very brief look at what addiction is and unpacked how it isn't a moral failing, let's take a look at recognizing your role as someone who loves an addict and what you can do to protect yourself and offer meaningful support to the person struggling. When you love someone who's struggling with addiction, it's only natural, hopefully, in many cases, to want to offer support. The question is how to offer support. No one knows how to offer support because every single case is individual and different. Every drug is different. Every behavior or even mental illness around the addiction is different. Individuals are different. So let's take a look at that. So when it comes to trying to help an addict who is struggling with addiction, many terms are thrown around. You'll probably have heard the term enabling. For example, many parents like my mom allowed me to still stay in the home while I was going through my addiction, and I became increasingly violent in this environment, stole from my mom, spent her money, and manipulated her. That was the nature of my addiction. I took advantage of my mom's kindness, and many people would turn around to my mom and tell her she is enabling me. Now, the word enabling creates a sense of guilt and makes the person feel responsible for the individual who's struggling, responsible for their addiction. This prevents that person, in this case my mom, from going to other people and telling them what is going on with her for fear of being told she's enabling and being blamed for my addiction, even if the person doesn't mean it like that. So a lot of people will be fearful to tell someone what's going on because of words like enabling being thrown around. That creates a sense of guilt and shame. So with that in mind, I think it's important we look at helping someone with an addiction in a different light. Don't see it as you trying to fix the person's addiction. Fixing is the wrong term. Try and shift it from fixing to supporting recovery. Because it's important to recognize that you are not responsible for fixing another person's problem or addiction because you can't be responsible for stopping it or fixing it. No one else can make that choice for another human being. But what you can do is empower them and provide them with resources to take control of their addiction. Let me put it to you this way. You cannot cure or fix someone else's addiction. That's not your role and it's not within your control. What you can do is provide support in a way that empowers the person to take responsibility of their recovery. So what does this look like? This might look like encouraging them to seek professional help, to seek support in support rooms, and to set clear boundaries. But in my opinion, the key here is to identify your role as someone who is there to support and encourage recovery, not to take on the weight of their recovery. With that in mind, every single situation is different. What works for one family may not work for another family. Let me give you an example, okay? When it comes to the topic of tough love or setting boundaries and saying, I'm not going to help you anymore until you help yourself. My mom, when it comes to my mom, many people would say my mom enabled my addiction. That's because she offered me a place to stay when I was sick, and she tried to shield me from the consequences of my actions. And it allowed me a space where I could steal from her and literally physically harm her to get my substance of choice. But because she had the fear of, I am enabling my child, no one else is going to listen to me and everyone's going to blame me for help. So the cycle continued. But she did provide me with a safer place, which meant when I did go through a trauma and active addiction, I had a place to go home to and kind of deal with that trauma and go out and use again. So that is what happened with me. It was almost a form of harm reduction for myself, inflicting more harm on my mother. Now, then you get someone like my brother who put down a clear boundary with me and practiced tough love. He said to me, I want nothing more to do with you. You keep relapsing. We take you to get help. You come out, you relapse, you cause more harm. I want nothing to do with you. I will not speak to you again until you are sober and until I see the work and change behavior in your sobriety. He put down a clear boundary that many people would label as tough love. But my brother was younger than me. My brother had his own demons, his own mental health issues, and his own pain. And he knew that in order to survive in the environment he was born into, he needed to take a step back from me and provide me with a consequence. My brother was very aware that in that time he took a step back, I could have died. He had done the research. He knew I could have died, and he had dealt with feelings around that because to him, in his words, it was almost like I had died already and he had mourned the person I was. He was doing a lot of work, but he was also very young. So even to understand the massive consequence of what would have happened if I did die and he had taken a step back, he can't even understand if he would have felt that guilt and that shame. So there's lots of nuance and understanding there that I don't know how he would have coped if something like that did happen to me. And so those are two opposite ends of the spectrum, my mother versus my brother. Now, in this situation, in my opinion, neither of those choices were wrong because they were important to the individual making the choice. My mom wanted to make sure I was okay and offered me support in a time where it was difficult to offer me support. My brother needed to take care of his mental and physical health and had to take a step back. Now, for me, both situations affected me differently. My mother offering me a place to stay made it easier for me in my mind, even though I didn't think it then. If I look back, I can see it now, to take advantage of the situation and manipulate the situation. Dangle something in front of her, like coming home and saying, I promise you I'm done, I'm never doing it again. Give her that false sense of hope, take money from her, relapse, and the cycle continues. With my brother, I felt a very big sense of abandonment. I felt unloved. I felt like I had a point to prove to him. And if he didn't care for me, who gives a shit? I'm going to do what I want anyway. So basically, everyone was in a situation where I was the one whose feelings were making the situation worse, and everyone did not know how to handle it. And I was going to insert this further down the video, but I'm going to do it here now. What was missing from my mom and my brother's decision back then? What was missing from the sense of enabling and the sense of tough love? Two words I don't like too much. My mom and my brother both didn't know what was available to help them because I went through my addiction with my eyes closed, solely focused on me and my drug of choice and nothing else. They went through my addiction, with their eyes open, solely focused on me and nothing else. So they remember and they went through everything while I was driven, like we said in the brain disorder segment of this, to prioritize my addiction above all else. I couldn't see how I was hurting them. What they didn't know was that there was support available for them, for you, for loved ones of addicts. We speak about Narcotics Anonymous, we speak about Alcoholics Anonymous, we speak about harm reduction, but did you know that there are support groups available for loved ones, friends, family of addicts? Because they are, and not many people know this. And I wish my family knew this existed, because there are support groups such as NAR Anon within Narcotics Anonymous that offers support groups for family and loved ones of addicts. There is Al-Anon within Alcoholics Anonymous that offers support groups for loved ones of alcoholics. So you can find these spaces and go into a room where you can learn from other people's experiences, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what they struggle with, and feel less alone. Feel less alone, feel a connection, feel community, and learn how to recognize traits in yourself and how to cope with certain situations that will work for you. Just like addicts need support, family and loved ones of addicts need support. Like I said, I went through my addictions with my addiction with my eyes closed. They went through my addiction with their eyes open. They needed support, they needed love, they needed guidance. And if they went to someone who didn't necessarily understand addiction, they would hear terms like enabling, tough love, and immediately the stigma falls on them too. And they don't understand, and they don't know where to go, and they do not know what to do. So finding a community that serves you, supports you, is game changing, in my opinion. So how do we reframe all of this? How do we reframe the term enabling? Even maybe instead of asking yourself, am I enabling them and am I enabling their addiction? Ask yourself if your actions are helping them move closer to them making the choice for recovery. Essentially, these kinds of questions shift the blame game and take it from blaming to problem solving. And most importantly, to a sense of self-awareness. To sum it up, recognizing your role doesn't mean taking on the weight of someone else's recovery and being the perfect supporter. It means understanding your limits, setting healthy boundaries, and finding ways to offer support that are healthy and sustainable for both of you. Now let's get into boundaries. One of the most important things to remember when caring or loving someone with addiction is yourself. You need to set boundaries for your safety and your mental health. And setting boundaries shouldn't necessarily be about punishing them or punishing the addict. It should be about protecting yourself. For example, it might get to a point where you don't allow substance use in your home or you do drug testing at home. But when implementing these boundaries, they need to be clear. They also need to be communicated calmly and compassionately. For example, I love you, but I can't support this behavior. Or here are resources for help, like actual help. Here are resources for 12-step meetings. I have looked into places you can go, people you can speak to, help that is offered for you. I will take you there, I will drive you there. I will make sure you get the help you need in the way that I can provide it, whether it's free help or you have the means to send someone to a facility, which a lot of people don't have the means to, which is why I do speak a lot about 12 steps and other related support groups. Basically, tell them what is available, say what is available, what you're willing to do, and you will be there when they want the help. But again, you may not want to take money away from your kid, from your partner, from the person you love, because what are they going to end up doing in order to get the money that they need to sustain their addiction? This is what my mom went through. These are the thought processes that went on with my mom. My brother was like, dude, if you need to experience a consequence, experience the consequence, I will love you through it. My mother didn't want me to have to experience those consequences. She was protecting me. So she made these choices without telling anyone else she was making these choices. Had the sense of she's enabling me, blamed herself for it. Cycle continues, cycle continues. I was able to take advantage of that too. Again, what my mom didn't know was that there was a support community available to her or people she could talk to or she could have gone and gotten help and been guided on making those decisions in a healthier way that could benefit her, protect her, while guiding me towards recovery as much as she could. With that in mind, let's discuss the role of consequences that come with addiction. Like we briefly touched on with the way my brother implemented a sense of tough love and had to deal with the fact that I may not make it through my addiction, then he has to deal with the fact that he implemented tough love on me. Or the way my mom continued to enable, and I keep using air tags, enable my addiction, and she had to deal with the consequences of the progression of it. When I look at what my brother did, I can see the love and the sadness in the choice he made to take a step back from me. But I can see that now, in hindsight, in sobriety, in recovery. I had to face a consequence. I lost my sibling because of my addiction. But there are many situations where experiencing a consequence does push someone to get help, and that did happen to me. I was in and out of institutions. My family would book me into a facility, take me out, I would relapse, and the cycle would continue, okay? The last time I went to a facility, my mom had had enough. She had had enough. She was like, I can't keep hiding what is going on with you. I can't keep shielding you what's going on with you. I am going to reach out to your father, who was not a big part of my life at that point. When that happened, I went to my father's house to try and manipulate him and make him believe that my mom was exaggerating the situation, which I couldn't hide because of what I looked like and obviously everything my father had seen and heard from other people. And when I walked into my father's home, he said to me, you are going to get help or you're literally, there's nothing more we can do for you. There's nothing more. And he meant it in that moment. He was absolutely torn up about it, but he meant it because he knew I was close to death at that point. And it was the first time I really felt like this was maybe a last chance. Like it was a last chance. Like I either had to go to this facility or I was going to be on the streets and in my car without a choice, because I did that by choice many times. And that helped me go to an institution that I never necessarily wanted to go to, but eventually found my footing within that space and what worked for me in that space. But that's a whole other video. Again, that was a consequence. Another consequence I received in active addiction was losing my business and my job. I was a partner in an events agency, and my business partner kindly told me that they would remove me as a partner from the business because of what I was going through, that it didn't help my addiction, and I was destroying the business, essentially. Another consequence that I needed to experience, because this person did offer me help over and over again, and I would take advantage of that. But I needed to experience that consequence and get a little bit of a wake-up call. That worked for me. Many people that I know personally had the police called on them and were put in prison for behaviors in active addiction because their parents or family were so desperate to get them a consequence that they could see that their addiction had some sort of consequence. This is a very scary thing for many parents to do. And in fact, and if parents do it with the love and the good intentions, and it's been this ongoing cycle and it does work, I really applaud that. Some people do put addicts in more dangerous situations when they make those kinds of tough love choices, which is why support groups are so vital and so important, to be able to see what the consequences can be for you when you do make that choice. So you understand all angles. I do believe that consequences are important. I do. I think it's important to understand what those consequences could be and see if you're okay with making the choice to implement a consequence and experience the results of what could happen after said consequence. Instead of shielding someone from a consequence, don't purposely punish them. I feel that's important to say. It needs to be in a way that allows them to see the impact of their addiction, in a way that allowed me to see the impact of my addiction. And it always needs to end with, when you're ready to get help, I will be there for you. Unless, now here's another thing. Here's a whole other thing. Unless that person has pushed you too far and hurt you so severely that you will not be there for them when they want recovery, because that's your right too. That's your right too. There were many people I hurt in my active addiction that have never forgiven me to this day. Many. And they have every single right not to. The only person that owes me forgiveness is me. Again, that is a consequence. You need to see what is best for you, your mental health, and your physical safety. Because I put a lot of people in physical harm, emotional harm, and in dangerous situations. And you know what? They don't owe me forgiveness. They really don't. Who am I to say you owe me forgiveness because I'm 12 years sober? I put them in a shitty situation. They have to deal with that trauma and they have to work through it. So again, also recognize that these are the nuances. Okay, so now we have taken a look at understanding briefly what addiction is. We've taken a look at the concept of tough love and enabling, the problems with the words, how to kind of reframe your understanding around that, support groups for you as someone who loves an addict. And then, of course, offering the addict help and saying, I am here to help you when you are ready. Now, that's all well and good to say in theory. Now, where do we actually get resources for help? And it's also important to remember, yes, offering someone to go to a rehab is one thing. Getting someone into a rehab is another. They need to make that choice. And there is finances involved in that. Rehabilitation is expensive. So how do we take someone who is in a situation where they are not financially stable and say to them, you need to go to rehab? There are free resources available too, and research is key. Speaking to other people who have been through it is key. Going to those support groups is key. Finding other people who are going through what you're going through is key. Seeing what worked for them is key. So let's discuss resources a little bit, right? So personally for me, I've put together a link tree that has a variety of global resources in it. This is everything from 12-step programs, like free Narcotics Anonymous meetings. You can find them all over the world, online, in person, every single day. Same thing with Alcoholics Anonymous, but there are also other options, like looking into harm reduction services. Unfortunately, there aren't many available in my country, but there are resources for it, and this usually involves going to a doctor or a therapist in order to speak to them. That does, however, cost money. That is financial. There's finance involved in that. Oh my God, I wish we had harm reduction facilities, fam. So I do have a lot of resources that I put together that are available. Everything from 12-step meetings, if you're uncomfortable with 12-step meetings. You can also seek out, if you're a religious person, no matter what your religion, there are religious-based recovery programs available to you as well. You know, you need to find those spaces that this person will be comfortable in and put together resources for this. I have my resources that are available, but there are so many out there, also individual to where you're from, your community, your culture. There is a lot available out there. And it's important to look at that, but do the research around it, because also a lot of people can take advantage of addicts, which is scary. It's a scary thought, which is why I absolutely say, look at recommendations, do your research when finding even a facility. If you're able to afford a rehab or an institution, definitely take a look at that. But also keep in mind that a lot of addictions people are physically dependent on. So alcohol, heroin, opioids, benzos. This is a physical addiction which requires medical treatment to detox and to withdraw from the substance. So do your research on that. Speak to a medical professional. Ask questions to people who have been through it. You know, do the research, know what's to come. Speak to the addict about that if that is their actual fear. Have these conversations and have the resources available for when the addict is ready. Again, at the end of the day, if you're a friend, it's not your job. Even if you're a family, it's not your job to convince. So it feels like it's your job, but it's not. Let's take away the word job. There is no way you're going to force someone to recover, but what you can do is have resources available to help them when they're ready and tell them you will be there when they are ready. But also remember to implement those boundaries to protect yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. I also want to touch on the fact that we're in the age of social media, and even though I'm not a big Facebook kind of fan, there are a lot of support groups on Facebook. So seek out specific support groups that are available where you can communicate with other individuals about what they're going through or what they've been through and their experience, and kind of learn from that or be able to make a decision based on that kind of information, because there are people that want to help and you deserve the help. I also want to say that if anyone has a specific kind of support group they know about that isn't on my link tree, please add it in the comments. Let's get resources together. I will not put up resources for rehabilitation facilities specifically. You can speak to me about that individually. I don't like to promote rehabilitation facilities individually because then I'm leaving a lot out. It also becomes very classist because a lot of rehabs are incredibly expensive and a lot of addicts cannot afford that kind of treatment. So I do not promote specific facilities. Okay, so now we need to look at treatment options. And this is how you can go about finding treatment options and putting together an understanding of what you want to offer the person and what you can offer the person. 1, look into detox programs in your area, especially if the person is physically dependent on a substance. 2, if you're able, look into rehabilitation programs that are affordable, that you can show the person and help make them a decision to go into said space. 3, you can also look at therapy or counseling, and there are also cost-effective ways to do this. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist or someone you have to pay, get a home loan to speak to. There are also peer support counselors available and online counseling available for the person, and that may be more cost-effective and come with payment plans that the person can in time pay out if they're able to. 4, there are community groups that are available that you can look into in your area, do your research around it, and see what is available and what is cost effective or hopefully free. Then, of course, 12-step programs. There are a variety of 12-step programs. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. There is even CODA, which is Codependency Anonymous. There are a variety, they're available, and you can find one that fits with the person who's willing to seek the help. Then you can look into MAT treatment options or harm reduction options. By the way, none of this is in order. I'm just giving you an idea. Medically assisted treatment options, which we discussed previously, which is also very helpful for people who have developed a physical dependency to the substance, and it helps in reducing harm and allows this person to slowly work on themselves, on their trauma, on their past, while slowly working through the addiction. And of course, there are also government initiatives that are available. Take a look at those too. Do your research. It is important that you have an understanding of what you can offer someone when saying to them, I want to help you find a solution or help you when you are ready to receive the help. It's important you have that available. And remember, if your loved one isn't ready for treatment or ready for help, that's okay. You planted the seed. They know they can come to you when they are ready. You cannot control the outcome. Okay, so what have we learned? We've taken a look at what addiction is briefly. We've taken a look at how you can protect yourself and put boundaries down for yourself, that there are support groups and help available for you too. And we have taken a look at collecting resources for the loved ones and offering it to them and saying, I will be here when you're ready, if you will be there when they're ready. And also understanding that your safety may be in danger and it is okay to take a step back and protect yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Trying to help a loved one who is struggling with addiction is difficult. It is one of the hardest things a person can do. And I always end my videos by saying, we do recover, to my fellow addicts. But I want to say to you, someone who's watching someone struggle with addiction, you deserve help too. And remember that protecting your own well-being while offering someone help does not make you selfish. I know this video was all over the place. I am just an addict who is giving you my perspective and my understanding. There are plenty of videos available that can give you practical steps towards helping someone. This video is to show you what is available, what to look out for, and what to expect. And I want you to know you are loved, you are seen, and thank you for educating yourself on this and doing your best. One day at a time, we do recover.